Now the moment you've all been waiting for.
I am Nate Riggle, and you are listening to The Way of the Bonfire.
All right, let's go. Hello, my friends. Today we have two announcements before we dive in. Number one, I created an Instagram page if you do want to interact with me or hopefully share some thoughts on the podcast. If you got feedback, just send a DM to at Way of the Bonfire on Instagram. And number two, I am officially introducing the fourth element of the Way of the Bonfire, which is going to be a permanent pillar of the podcast and our focus. So get stoked up for this. You ever just get that feeling like it's missing something? When you're making a recipe that you know the essence of, and maybe it's, your Italian grandmother's fourth generation. I don't know what to say, maybe spaghetti sauce or something. And when you taste it, you're like, yeah, it's getting there, but something is missing. When people are like, dude, it's already good. You should stop there. And you're like, nope, it's missing something. You ever feel that way in a relationship, a job, your career, or anything that matters to you? The purpose of this podcast episode today is twofold. Number one, to remind you that if you think something is missing, if you think it's missing something, so to speak, it probably is. And it's worth the pursuit to find. You don't need to second guess yourself and let everybody else say, nah, just move on, man. Or woman, or whoever you are. And secondly, it's to share with you what was missing from this podcast and this movement. I'm calling it that now. Yeah, I know, it's audacious. I like being audacious. So this is something that I pursued and found because I didn't give up on that little missing piece. I knew it was there. I just couldn't quite seize it. So let me back up and share some of the journey here. When I was launching this podcast, I had an incredible coach help me make or take the raw materials and these ideas or principles that I couldn't stop from haunting me. And this was way before I even thought to do a podcast. They're just floating around and around in my mind as something that I needed to do something with. And these coaches helped me make sense of what I needed to focus on to isolate the right pieces, at least to start with, along with some tips of what to keep my eyes open for as I move forward. They helped me land on the name and the general concept and direction, and suggested I distill it down into a few pillars. And those pillars came from the things that seem to be the source of what really makes a difference in this life. That's what I wanted to focus on, because I feel I just kept getting this kind of nagging sense like there's all these people running around acting like maybe they're making lots of money and whatever they're doing, they're super successful, but they somehow seem to have missed something super important and they don't seem to mind. And so I was thinking, look, am I just acting like a know-it-all entitled person? And these coaches came along and they were like, what you're describing is a really important thing to be getting out there. And of course, I'm paying them to say that, but it was authentic and genuine, and they didn't have really any kind of incentive to stroke me on that, right? Because they knew that I could sniff out if they were just giving me lip service there. But anyway, those pillars came from what really makes a difference in this life. Like, if we can back it up and distill it down, I talked about, and you've heard this on the podcast if you've been listening, if it's your first time, curiosity, perspective, and fulfillment. Those have to be sort of the anchors in the way that we go about things They have to be a common staple in our lives if we want to stay kind of on the path that we want to be on. And I was thinking about how those pillars could be linked to the elements of a bonfire and a path and a way of being and the beacons that keep us from drifting off course. And I realized there were 3 in the fire, quote unquote, fire triangle that they usually teach in basic fire building, whether it's in the Boy Scouts or in safety lessons. You know, they talk like when the firemen come to your school and they say, here's the 3 elements of the fire. They talk about oxygen, heat, and fuel. And so for the metaphorical bonfire, I thought, what are the key elements? Curiosity, perspective, fulfillment. I had this feeling like I said before, I was still missing something that brings it all together, and was trusting that it would come to me if I just got going and kept seeking more inspiration. That's how things happen a lot. Once you write something down, more inspiration comes. Once you take some action on your initial inspiration, then the picture starts to become a little more clear as you go along. And it's frustrating because we want to know things and have some guarantee before we start moving, but that's just not how things work. Not in a super meaningful way. So I'm dancing around with this other principle, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it or categorize it the way I wanted. And then as I started to pursue and really try to live into and embody these other 3 and be less of a hypocrite about them and actually start living it, and I was putting more focus and consistency in my life in those other 3 areas. One day in the last few weeks, it hit me in the face like a 2x4 from the Almighty. I was looking at the triangle only in a 2-dimensional view and perceiving it like, what I mean by that is like it was drawn on a piece of paper, like a triangle that you just did 3 equilateral lines on a piece of paper, because I had a limited perspective until I started getting curious by really moving closer to it and seeing what other vantage points there might be. And there's this object called a tetrahedron. And you probably remember it from just basic geometry, but it's basically a 2D triangle if you're only looking at it from one angle and far away, but it's a 3D object is a tetrahedron. It's a triangle that has like 4 faces or 4 sides, and you can either Google it or just imagine a pyramid that has a triangular bottom instead of a square one. I promise I'm going somewhere with this. So it has these 3 faces, but then a bottom face, and that's the base or the 4th side. And in fire mitigation and risk protocols, they even call it the fire tetrahedron. There's this 4th key element both to a physical fire, and it's almost the same thing in the metaphorical fire. As I dug into this, and you could probably hear it in my voice, I started seeing parallel after parallel that got me amped up like a geek at a Star Trek convention. Relax, I'm a geek, and Star Trek's pretty cool. I'm a man too, but most real men are geeks. Any type of fire requires the 4 parts of this tetrahedron: oxygen, fuel, heat, and a chemical reaction. But a bonfire is not just any fire. It also needs a chemical chain reaction. What's the difference between a chemical reaction and a chemical chain reaction? That's coming, so prepare to have your mind blown. But the metaphorical or spiritual version of the chemical chain reaction is, and here's the 4th part of the bonfire, the way of the bonfire, connection. The connection is why people love bonfires. Not just observing this bonfire that's having these crazy things happen in it, but the connection with the people that are sitting around the bonfire. It's one of the major elements of what makes it a bonfire in the first place. But there's something really profound about the similarities of a chemical reaction and the concepts of connection. Reading up a little bit on this. So in a chemical reaction, the reactants, or, the wood, the oxygen, the fuel, the different pieces of it, they contact each other. They come in contact, or they're close enough to be connected. And then bonds between atoms in the reactants are broken, and atoms rearrange and form new bonds to make a new molecule. I hope you're following me on this, because this is what excites me about this whole thing. Connection, so that's the chemical reaction. Connection is about bringing two or more ideas or concepts or people or things into close enough contact that they form new bonds and create something new. A bonfire is a chemical chain reaction. So the chemical reaction causes more chemical reactions that keep branching out based on how many other contacts there are with the other reactants. In other words, if there's more wood and more coals touching them, it's not just a little spark or a flame that goes out. There's a compound effect, and it's magical. So curiosity and perspective and fulfillment are nothing without the chain reaction and momentum that comes in the crucial bonding elements of connection. There's no fire to enjoy without all four of them. And if you remove any one thing, it extinguishes the fire. And it's all just isolated stuff of potential energy. I'm going to say that again. It's all isolated stuff of potential energy. But you know what I hate hearing? Because of the real meaning that sits underneath it? This guy has a lot of good raw talent. There's so much potential there. You have so much potential, Nathan. I see a lot of potential in you. My dad used to say, does it pass the so what test? And simply being happy and grateful and admired for your potential does not pass the so what test. It's like, who cares? If all you have is potential. First of all, I don't care what your limited view is of my potential. That's why I don't like it, those sayings. The secret meaning behind you have so much potential that I take from it is you could be so much more. But right now you're just letting it sit there. I don't want to be potential. I want to be a blaze that burns as bright as it ever was meant to. But I will never do that, even if I connect all of my own elements perfectly. As a single person or a single individual, I'm a married person, but like as an individual, my chain reaction has a limit. True connection is not an individual and limited thing. It's infinite. I'm going deep on this one, baby. I want to combine my curiosity and perspective and the fulfillment experiences which I have with, this is super important, combine those three things with the curiosity and perspectives and fulfillment of others, and keep this fire going in a never-ending, multiplying and branching chain reaction. We're humans who live, or at least exist, and then die. But connection with ourselves, each other, and God means we have a chance to be a bonfire as a united people with these things that we've combined. We have a chance to be together a bonfire that never burns out. It's the big secret right under our noses. Darkness is the absence of light or visible light, but we've been given the ability and the connection to turn the light on anywhere we want to. But one person can't light 8 billion bonfires. It takes 30 years to even count to 1 billion. But if we combine our efforts together to go turn these lights on, the ones that we can get to, it's not even that hard of a lift. And when we combine our bonfire with a greater power, a higher power beyond this world, and beyond our understanding of it. This is just easy stuff. But let's go turn on all the lights together. Let's not, maybe it's dark because you haven't turned the light on. That's right next to you. Go get 'em.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Every single time I do this, I get a little more fired up and my bonfire grows a little bit more. If you're feeling the same way and like you got value out of this, would you do me a favor and go onto the show page in your Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening to this and leave a rating and click follow? That way you never miss another episode of the show, and it helps me immensely to keep the momentum and keep bringing the good stuff for you. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks.